Hey, folks, Miguel Dorati back here on the MMA Museum podcast, and I am joined by a veteran of fights in Florida and also a guy that kind of grew up dreaming about being in the UFC and made it to the UFC, which, there are a lot of guys that don't get there. He had a handful of fights in the UFC, a shorter career. He went 10-5 overall, according to the internet records. But I had the pleasure of matchmaking for him early in his career. Very intense fighter. He is going to give us a good memories of the Florida scene, which was very robust when he was coming up. I've got Chainsaw Charles McCarthy with me. How you doing, Chainsaw?
Sure. Oh, great to see you, Miguel.
Man, I remember you debuting for me, but we'll get to that first. Talk about growing up a little bit. You said, were you a wrestler in high school? Did you play sports? Were you an athlete or not? What was going on in your youth that led you down this martial arts path?
So I grew up in Miami and I played the little kid sports growing up, like football and baseball and soccer and all that. By the time I got to high school, I wasn't really doing sports anymore, just with my friends. But when I was 13, UFC came out and I saw it first like in a video store. Somebody was playing it in a video store, and I was like, wow. I was a huge fan of boxing. So when I saw that, I was like, I wonder how those guys would do against Mike Tyson. And the guy was like, this guy Royce Gracie would kill Mike Tyson. And I was like, no way. So I ended up buying the video. I watched it like 1,000 times. And me and my friends would buy all the UFC tapes. And then we would try to fight like in our neighborhood. Like I was running fight clubs in the neighborhood. Um, and it just kind of kept progressing to the point where like I was beating up all my friends, and they were like, you need to go and train with people that know what they're doing because we don't want to get beat up anymore. um, so I was a software developer at the time, and I started finding places around me. So one of the places I found was a guy named Pablo Popovich, was up in Fort Lauderdale. um, and then I found the guys that I ended up with, the Avalon brothers down in Miami.
Okay,
And they
how
were
old were you when you started training with the Avalons?
19 when I started. So this
So
would have
you
been
spent
99.
about 5 years doing like the garage training kind of thing for yourself?
Yeah, I was doing the like fight clubs in my yard and everything for like 4 or 5 years, but it didn't seem like that was like a career path or anything. So it wasn't like, it was just something I was doing for fun, and I was like doing computers for work. And somewhere along the line, I just decided I wanted to take it a step further, and I started seeking out like, real training. And so when I linked up with the Avalons, I was like, they were training out of like a garage at the time. Like it was the head guy's, his now current ex-wife, but it was her father's taekwondo school that was out of a small warehouse. Um, and then they would give it to us in off hours, and we would just like, it was very informal. It was run really like a fight club. Those guys were like high school wrestlers, and they were very smart engineers, and they kind of reverse engineered fighting in a way that was really palatable for me. I really enjoyed the way they thought about it. Um, so I
Well,
I just
well,
started.
let's talk about that first day walking in and meeting Marcos and David Avalon, because both guys are also the black belts at this point, very advanced black belts, very accomplished fighters. Um, they put guys, George Masvidal is on the map because of them.
Yeah,
And he's probably the biggest star, but they had their hands in a lot of people,
a
including
lot of
Kim.
the best fighters out of Miami came through there for sure.
So what was your
Um,
first day there like?
Well, it was before any of that happened. So like when I first walked in, originally I was looking to compete in something. So I had found something to compete in, and then I was looking at places that I could go to train for that competition. And when I reached out to them, I was like, "Hey, I saw that you guys have competed in this. Like, Dave Avalon had, and he had beaten Pablo Popovich in it. So I was like, I would like to come train with you guys." And my goal is to be a UFC fighter, and they probably thought I was like retarded at the time, like. Like I run a school now. When people tell me that, I look at them, I go, okay, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I
But
guess I'll tell you, as a matchmaker, I would always get like a manager telling me, um, this guy's going to be a UFC champion, and I felt the same way. Like, yeah, right, you know what I mean? And then every
it's
once in a while, there was a
it's
guy
like
that became a
so
UFC
far
champion.
fetched now, like hearing it. But at the time, I was like so gung ho about it, and I was always a pretty intense person. So like when I wanted something, I would just do whatever it took to get there. So I showed up at their gym, and I was like 275 pounds back then, like not in great shape. Like it was like a far-fetched dream, like it seemed like.
Were,
But
were you a, were you a, like into powerlifting or anything like that, or was it just extra weight?
I was working on a computer for a few years and not exercising really and just gaining weight. So like, yeah, I would beat up like people that didn't train in my yard, but it didn't really amount to much. So I was like, like Scott Ferozzo,
Mhm.
it was past my prime already at that point. Um, so I showed up at their place, and like Dave Avalon was like, I don't know, maybe like 210 or something like that. And Marcos was like 185 pounds. And they had a couple other guys that were a little smaller. And it was just really like all sparring back then. Like they would show a couple moves and then we would just all go at it. And I did pretty good because I was so much bigger than everybody, and I had been fighting in my yard a lot. So I did okay, but then when I went against like Dave Avalon, he just mopped the floor with me, and it was like, okay, this guy's much smaller than me, and he could kick my butt. So I feel like I'm at the right place. So I just started showing up every day. It was like an hour and a half drive from where I was coming from, and I would just go there every single day and train. And they kept progressing. They built their FFA gym. Um, Masvidal came to train with us at the time. He was like an amateur boxer at the time. Remember like Alex Caceres, who's in UFC now. He was like a ninth grader out of high school wrestling that came to train with us, him and his brother. Um, and it was a lot of like people that would become big names that all came through there. But at the time, like who knew what we were doing? Like UFC or MMA wasn't even legal in Florida at the time. I think you guys put on the first legal MMA show in Florida with AFC One.
Mhm.
And so like when that all went down, I was like, I got to get on this show. Like I've got to get on the show. I reached out to like Carlos Carlone back then and a couple other people. I think Masvidal got on like AFC 2 or something like that. And then I got on the next one. It was somewhere around there. And yeah, just kind of progressed from there. We didn't have amateur fighting back then. So I was doing like tons of like Naga competitions and was traveling all over the country, trying to win all these super fights and stuff like that. It didn't pay anything, but like we couldn't hit or anything like that. So like I remember my first fight that I did for you. It was like walking into something I had no idea. Like yeah, I trained a lot, but nothing really prepares you to fight like another trained fighter, other than doing it. So
Yeah,
there was a
let's look back at that. It was it looks like the Absolute Fighting Championship. I'm not sure. It doesn't have the numbers on the site I'm looking at, but it was one of the early AFCs in Florida, Fort Lauderdale. Thanks to Papa Dan, Lambert. But you fought Jay Massey, and Jay is one of those guys from Indiana, and we really worked a lot on that Indiana Midwest guys coming down to Florida to test the guys down in Florida. And Massey's one of those guys with a reputation. I recently interviewed one of his training partners that won some black belt world championships in the master senior divisions. A guy named Joel Blanton, and Joel said that Massey was one of those guys that you hit him hard, and even if he was hurt, he would hit you back harder. I
it
guess,
was a
a
scary
real
looking
rugged
dude for
guy.
sure.
So I think it's a good physical matchup because I think that you're one of your building blocks is that you're kind of a tough guy, kind of like a strong guy, like you're stronger than you look, kind of thing, if I
That's what
remember correctly.
that's
So,
what I hear from people.
so what do you remember about the Jay Massey fight? Because it went well for you.
Well, I remember going and meeting him like for the first time, like at the weigh-ins or something, and I go, man, this guy's a fucking beast. Like he was so impressive looking. And I was like, I don't know, I had talked such a big game to everyone how I was gonna go to UFC and I was gonna do this and that, and this was like reality like staring me in the face. So I was like, I just gotta go get this done. And I remember the fight started and um I don't remember exactly how it went, but I remember I got him in a Kimura and he was like grabbing his shorts. And I was like, I'm pretty sure he's not allowed to do that. And the referee like smacked his hand away, and I grabbed the Kimura, I finished it, and I finished the fight with it, and I got up and I just thought to myself, I go, like I wanted to pinch myself. I couldn't believe it was real. Like I go, I remember leaving the fight, driving home with my girlfriend at the time, and I go, like I can't believe I'm a professional fighter now. Like it just seemed so surreal to me, the whole concept. I had spent so many years like watching all these tapes and studying, and those guys to me were like I one day dreamed that I could be amongst that group of guys, but I never imagined it was going to happen. And then, to have it happen in a real show like AFC, and it was just such a cool feeling. I really was like lost in the feeling, and that those first bunch of fights were really special for me. They felt like you're fighting against like your fears, and then you break through to the other side. It was a great feeling.
Now, this is 2003, so you're a young man. You're 23 years old, kind of living out a dream here. But you also said you were a software engineer, so you got a head on your shoulders as well. What did it look like to you? Because this actually was a show with a high level of talent on it. We had the main event was Dean Thomas. Akira Shoji came in from Japan to fight Clean Dustin Dennis. Vitor Ribeiro was there fighting Ivan Menjivar, who's also a monster. Jeff Munson fought. George Masvidal, your teammate, fought against a Midwest guy named Brian Garrity. I've heard George say this is one of his toughest fights of all time. Um, what was your what was your impression of the rest of the guys and how far you had to go? Because I remember your intensity. I remember you, like I said, you showed up, you had a samurai headband on, and that I remember you saying, "I'm going to the UFC," and and like I said, you do wonder who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong about those things. It turned out that you were right, that you pursued it. Not everyone gets there, so that's my hats off to you. But that first time, there were doubts in your mind at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it was a weird feeling because, like, so, like I told you, I started training like in '99. And so we're talking like 2003. In that time span, I had gone and won a ton of grappling stuff. And I had traveled all over and trained with all these high level fighters. And I was beating them all in the training room, like on the ground. Like I was able to take them down and submit pretty much almost everyone I trained with. So I was like, I mean, it seemed like, like with the powers of deduction that I could say, okay, I could probably do this in a fight too. So I felt pretty confident that I could do that I mean, it sounds cocky, but I felt like I could do that to anyone in the world at the time. Like I hadn't met somebody I couldn't do that to at that point. So, um, yeah, I felt like I belonged there, but at the same time, I mean, how do you know what happens when you get kneed in the face, or like there just was variables there that I had never encountered, and I was aware of that too. And so there's a lot of luck that goes along with it too, like not any of us are so good that we can't not ever get hit. And then once you get hit, like if you get hit in the wrong spot, like just there's so many variables, like different than just grappling. And grappling is a lot less variables. Like the better grappler is usually going to win. But in fighting, like you see guys upset other fighters all the time when they just land a great shot. So I was definitely nervous of that happening, and my striking was so terrible back then, like so bad. I think I did my first 3 or 4 fights without ever doing like any real kickboxing training. So
Okay.
like it was a different time back then. Like now I've got guys who are doing kickboxing and jiu-jitsu from day one, and the wrestling day one. They're doing all of it. But back then it was like you kind of were good at one thing back then. So
Yeah.
it left a lot open that something bad could happen. And so, yeah, I definitely had doubts every time I would fight. Like, I knew my own weaknesses, But at the same time, I knew like if I could get somebody where I felt comfortable, I was going to win the fight. And I had the ability not just to like take a guy down or control a guy, but I had really good finishing ability. So I knew like if I could get somebody where I wanted, I was going to get the finish. And that did happen most of the time.
That's good. Now, let me ask you, when you were doing the gym fighting and stuff, was it more grappling and doing the wrestling portion of it, the submission stuff, or were you throwing punches at some point, even if they were
We were throwing
rudimentary?
punches and stuff, but it just was shitty. It's terrible, like very low level. Like there was
Yeah,
no kick Florida back then. So like if you weren't at least boxing, like there was nothing else for you to do in Florida as far as like striking goes. There was some good old school like karate style kickboxers, but it wasn't like a real thing back then. Like it didn't really change until I feel like Henry Hoof moved down here and started like Blackzilians, and then striking started becoming higher level in Florida. But until then, Florida was never really a real high level striking state.
yeah. Now, did you ever run across some of the old school veterans there? Like, who has a school down in South Florida, even to this day, is Bart Vale. I don't know if you remember Bart
One
Vale.
of the originals. He trained one of my coaches who fought for you also, Efren Ruiz. Efren had a
Okay.
funny story to me. He told me, he goes, first day I walked in there, I was like a teenager, and Bart Vale like made me spar with him. He broke my nose, it was bleeding all over the place.
Yeah,
But
Bart's one of those old school guys, he was old by the time MMA came around. He was close to 40 when he did his first MMA fight, but he had spent a lot of time in Japan.
do you
Um,
still have a school really in
yeah,
Miami?
yeah. I recently
Well, I need to
visited
go down
him
and visit.
about a year and a half ago. We went with a friend of mine who's a collector who bought some stuff from him, like his American flag shorts and stuff like
Oh,
that.
cool.
Um, and the thing about Bart is he's known as a pro wrestler. A lot of people put him down, but the pro wrestling he was doing in Japan is where like Maeda and Takada and
Yeah, there were
Sakuraba
streaks
all,
in there.
all came
Those
from.
tough guys.
So how about I know that the Avalons at some point uh obviously, crossed over into also that cross training and not just doing jujitsu stuff. And they brought in a coach that was with Masvidal for a lot of fights named Marcelo Tigre. Did you
Yeah,
ever
I
get a
trained
chance to
with
train
him
with
too.
him?
Yeah, I trained with him quite a bit. So that was my first delve into kickboxing. Um, so he was coaching like Mike Cardozo and Efren Ruiz. And so they introduced Marcos to Tigre. And then we all started going over and training at Tigre's. But that was like, I was already a couple fights in. That was like right before I had my UFC debut.
Okay.
Um, and
Okay. So
he's
we'll get
awesome down there.
there.
Trains pretty much all the best strikers in Miami, like trained through him.
Yep, and he was a guy who I'm from Chile. My family's from Chile, and he had lived in Chile, and so me and him got along really good.
Yeah,
And I
characters.
thought he was a step up in professionalism too. Like he was kind of crazy, but along with that, he what he was
He's
teaching George
really
was
good.
really good.
He came down with Team Freedom, the guys who like liberated from Cuba. That's how he ended up in Miami.
It's crazy. It's definitely crazy stuff. Now, one of the sites has an early bout for you. Your debut was July 19, 2003. In October, you were scheduled to fight a guy named Romez Brower, and the fight got canceled. That probably happened a lot in the early days where you were trying to line up fights and they fell through and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I haven't heard that name in so long. What show was that? Was that going to be in Georgia? I was supposed to fight him?
Yeah, let me check and see what I have because Tapology has some
That's
details, but not a
crazy that they
lot.
happened.
What do you remember? Why was that canceled? It looks like it was a fight party trauma in Dalton, Georgia. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. That was for Brett Moses. I don't know. Guys used to cancel on me all the time. I had that happen in your show where I ended up fighting Pat O'Malley the second time because like 13 guys canceled for that fight. I don't know why. You'd know better than me. I don't know why guys cancel so much, but that definitely happened a lot.
Yeah, on our show, we had a fine line where, we paid a little more, maybe a little more than,
Like you
other
guys,
more
what you
mediocre
paid back
shows.
then, is still more than most guys make now on their first fights.
Yeah, no, and you know, again, that's thanks to Dan. But I do think that we also had that reputation of you were going to get a real fight, and it was going to be tough, and there were no, you know, like Dan running ATT, we got ATT guys beaten on the show. Dan was okay with that. You know what I mean? It wasn't a show where we were just bringing in guys and to notch up records. So sometimes the matchmaking, you know, got hairy because, you know, people pull out and, you know, but we got used to it. We always used to say, uh, like the Wednesday before fight night, fight week, you know, on that Wednesday, at least three things are going to go wrong. So, so we got used to it, but we'll get there. So yeah, Dalton, Georgia, and that was Brett Moses. You said
Yeah.
how'd you hook up with that? Was that Marcos making your management calls at that time?
No, believe it or not, I was always managing myself for the most part, and then I was managing Marcos and David and Masvidal and all those guys. Um, I was dating this girl who was in art school, and when she was down in Fort Lauderdale, and when she got out of art school, she got offered a job up in Atlanta, and I was like, I'll go to Atlanta. Like, why not? I knew Forrest Griffin was up in that area and a couple other good people. So I went up there and checked it out, and I liked the guys that I was training with. I thought the skill level was good. So I moved with her to Atlanta, and I was up there for a little while. And one of the first people I met was this guy named Cam McCarg. I don't know if you ever met him.
Oh,
Uh, he
sure,
was a,
he's fantastic.
he was like WEF champion back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. I'm
Um,
not sure he made UFC, but he was one of those guys at 170 that
yeah,
you
he
know
was really
carried a high
good.
level.
And he actually ended up refereeing in UFC. He's passed away now, but he was
Oh, God
um,
bless.
very, very talented guy. And when I moved up there, he was a guy I ended up training with. Just 'cause he was so hardcore. I loved it. Like we were sparring every day, and he just was forcing me to be good at where I wasn't. That's I met Cole Miller up there like my first week, and Cole was like just started training. Um, and he'd trained a lot of good people out of there. Um, so I started training with him, and he's like, "Hey, there's a fight show this weekend. I'm going to take you up there and introduce you to the promoter." And that's how I ended up meeting Brett Moses, who became one of my best friends. Brett was like at my wedding, um, and Brett's like, "Yeah, for sure, we'll put you on the next card." And I remember, I don't think I ended up fighting on that show, and I was like, this was crazy in Georgia. Like they would just pull people out of the stands to fight, you know. But I
Mhm.
guess people had heard already how good I was on the ground, and they couldn't get anyone to fight me. And on that show, and then I ended up fighting for him a couple shows later.
Yeah, I see the next time that you actually get in the ring is something called the ISCF Total Velocity in the Valley. I'm not getting a location on this one, but the opponent was hook and shoot veteran Wesley Bockert. I booked
Okay,
Bockert
so
a few times.
that was
Uh,
for a guy named Richard Cox,
okay,
who still promotes shows now. He worked for Combat Night, and he was based out of Valdosta at the time.
okay.
And that fight was probably in Valdosta, or it could have been in Phoenix, Alabama. They ended up moving one of the fights there last minute. And this
Okay.
guy, Wesley Walker, did you know who he was?
Yeah, he fought you know, he's a 185 pounder. We put him in for his debut against freaking Tyrone Roberts, who
Okay.
you know, who
Tough fight.
already had probably 40 fights. So that didn't go well for him, but he came back and won a couple of fights on hook and shoot and was definitely um a guy who I think you were his last fight. So he was definitely a guy that you know, in his two fights that he won showed that, you know, he could win a few fights. He had a little bit of a level.
So I knew nothing about him. This was one of the few times I go, like it seems professional. I should have a manager help me out with this stuff. And I just moved to Georgia. So like there was a guy up there named Matthew Waller, who ended up, I think, running the commission up there. And he trained with us at Cam's place. So he's like, "Yeah, I'll manage you. I manage a couple of guys here. I know everybody around here." And I go, "Okay, cool." So I go, for the fight, like I'd prefer not to fight a wrestler because, like I don't want to fight somebody that can out wrestle me and then end up on the bottom of like ground and pound for the whole fight. Like, it doesn't sound entertaining to me. I go, anyone else I'll fight, like world championship kickboxer, jiu-jitsu guy, whatever. I go, just don't really want to fight a wrestler. And he goes, okay, I got you. He goes, okay, you're going to be fighting on this card. You're fighting. And he gave me a name. It wasn't until I was like at weigh-ins that I found out the name was totally different, the name that he gave me and the guy I was fighting. So then it
And
ends
Wesley
up
Barker
being,
was a wrestler.
yeah. What? So still didn't know that. So I did the weigh-ins, everything, and I go, hey, Matt, that guy that I'm fighting, he doesn't have the same name as the guy you told me. And he goes, oh, I must have given you the wrong name or something. I go, okay, this is not really going well, this management thing. So then I'm in the ring waiting for him to come in, and they start announcing him, and they go, all Army wrestler wrestles at the Olympic Training Center. And I'm standing in the ring looking at Matt like, yo, what did you do to me here? So but thankfully it went well, and I was able to do to him what I had done to others, and I took him down and submitted him pretty quick.
Okay. I remember, if I remember correctly, and I may be wrong on this, but now that you mentioned the Army, it may be the case. He was with John Rankin.
Sounds possible. I knew very little about him. Everything I know about him, I learned from the ring announcer while I was sitting in the ring.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the management in those early days was, guys that maybe weren't going to get in the ring and fight, but are kind of, just as in love with the sport, but
Yeah, I
don't really
mean,
have a clue what they're doing.
some guys they just don't have the ability to do anything for themselves. So it's useful to have a guy that's willing to make phone calls for you and stuff like that. But if you're able to do stuff for yourself, nobody's going to care more about you than yourself. So I learned that pretty quickly. And then I think that was the last time I used a manager.
Yeah. Now the next fight, I've got one of those kind of half and half racy stories. I'm going to tell about it. Reveal something here that happened to me at that fight. So you fight O'Malley. Now O'Malley is
Tough
uh,
dude.
a tough dude, a very hardcore guy out of Milwaukee, actually from Madison, Wisconsin, and he trained with Dave Strasser, who's actually was one of my best friends in the sport. Um, and those guys were soldiers. They took, like you, I think you said later on, he replaced, finally fought you again after 13 replacements. He stepped in and fights for me at the last minute many times, and I respect Pat, and I think Pat liked and respected me. Um, but for this fight, I think you both had a little bit of notice and time, and you got him really really fast. What do you remember about this fight?
Well, that was the first time I really got hit really hard in a fight. Um, and this will make me realize I probably need to learn how to kickbox a lot better. So the fight started. He was a really nice guy, by the way. Like I didn't know before the fight, but after the fight and during my UFC career and everything, he would call me all the time and like, just talk to me, tell me about his son was wrestling, and he just was a great guy. I really liked him a lot. Um, Fight started and we were basically ended up in the clinch right away, and he hit me with like a clinch knee right in the jaw, and it split my lip like completely up and down, and it dropped me. Like I hit the floor, and then I looked up like, okay, this fight's still happening. And I just have this crazy looking guy coming at me to kill me. So I like dropped backwards, and I like played dead. So he went to go to mount. And as soon as he tried to step over mount, I brought my leg over for a heel hook. And that's how I ended up finishing the fight, was I heel hooked him right after that.
Yeah. So here's my story for this. Okay, so now Pat's one of my guys. I'm a little worried about him because he limped off, and when you get hit hard, I you weren't nice with that heel hook, and you didn't ease into it. You
I
got
was
him
trying to break his leg off, and he was not tapping either at
yeah.
all.
And so I go in the back and I check on him, and one of those things that life being what it is, Pat is extremely well hung.
Good for
So,
him.
so I look into him. I look into his locker area, and I go, "Are you okay?" And he pulls out his dick and goes, "Does this look swollen to you?" So he kind of let me know he was okay that way.
Funny
That's
guy.
my Pat O'Malley story for it. That Charles McCarthy caused me a little bit of a shock and awe there.
Well, like he really opened my eyes to like how serious it is to not have good striking. So after that, I go, I started training a lot more striking. But when I went through that experience where all the fights started falling out, and they were like, like, what do you want to do? I go, call Pat O'Malley. Like, that guy almost beat me. Like, I would like to have a more decisive win over him, or he deserves to get that back. Like, it just felt like he didn't get a fair shot at it because he like came in for the kill and I just snagged the heel hook on him. So it didn't feel fair to him. And then I didn't really feel like I had dominated that fight the way that I would normally like to win my fights. Like, I didn't always win. And when I lost, sometimes it was terrible. But when I win, I want to win. Like, I don't want to like squeak by a win. And I felt like I had just gotten out of there like barely.
It's interesting that that's your impression of it because, with time going by, now people, may not see the fight. They go through the record and they see, 30-second win. That's awesome, but you actually had your ups and downs in that 30 seconds, huh?
Oh, that was a wild 30 seconds, buddy.
That's interesting. Now, let me ask you, O'Malley could be 205, he could be 185. You said you were 275 when you were beginning your training and stuff. Where are you at this point in weight, and what is it that your goals are as far as where you wanted to fight?
At that time, you mean?
Yeah.
I probably was walking around 205, between 200 and 205. I had done some extreme dieting to get my weight down. It was like, people used to laugh at me. I did the Campbell soup diet, and I would get one can of Campbell soup and I'd eat half for lunch and half for dinner. And I did that for months. And
Wow.
so I brought myself down from 270 something to 200 pounds. And somehow I guess retained the strength that I had had. And so everyone told me I was like unusually strong for my size. And and I tried to use it like as I tried to be as technical as possible. And I just assumed if you could be technical and strong, it would be a really hard combination to beat. And so yeah, I would go into those fights cutting about 15 or 20 pounds for the fight.
Okay, so these are at 185. You're in the middleweight division now.
Yeah, sometimes I would balloon up between the fights because I had those bad eating habits, and I'd have to diet back down. I remember I had one UFC fight. I was training at ATT and I was training with Dan Lambert at the time, and he goes, "Bro, how much do you weigh? Like, aren't you have a fight coming up?" And I go, "No, I'm good. I'm like 217 now." He looked at me, he goes, "Are you insane?" Like,
Yeah, yeah. Now, speaking of ATT, your next fight coming up is against Marcel Ferreira, who is an ATT fighter. And this was a
tough.
little bit of that FFA versus ATT rivalry because with Dan and the sponsorships and the ATT name kind of getting big, the FFA guys, I think you guys maybe took that a little personally, like you felt like, hey, we're as good as school. And I'll be honest with you, Marcos and David are top-notch teachers. You know what I mean? And that's why I always book their fighters with a lot of confidence. But you guys kind of got to play second fiddle to ATT. Was that playing in your mind going into this fight, or did you have a
That's a good
chip on your
question.
shoulder?
For me, it was not really a thing because it wasn't my school, like, per se, but I think for them they felt that way. um I'd always been very friendly with ATT. Dan was always awesome to me. Laborio was always amazing to me. I'd become friendly with a lot of their fighters, and so for me, I was trying to like go to the UFC and like be best in the world, so I wasn't like trying to get lost in a local rivalry. But like, I guess if you own a local business and there's another competing business and they're doing similar things, then it's easy to get caught up in that. For me, I was just like, I'm fighting against a guy that was a jiu-jitsu world champion. He's one of the best black belts in the world. And, that's my strength. And I think I took that fight like on super last minute notice and had to cut a bunch of weight for it. And I go, like, this is a good chance. Like, I didn't know exactly how to get in UFC, but I figured if I won a big fight like that on King of the Cage, that would help me get there. So I took that fight and I felt pretty confident that I could win the fight. But Marcel beat me that night. He ended up taking me down a bunch. And it was close. Like, there was one point where I hit him with a knee and I knocked him out. And one of the old school fighters, James Waring, was the referee at the time, and he had a very hands-off approach to refereeing. So
Yeah.
when I knocked out Marcel with the knee, he like faced first on the floor, just like out, and I just started hitting him. And I looked up at at James and I was like, he's out. And I hit him a bunch of times. And all of a sudden Marcel just kind of like woke up from where the punches and rolled into half guard. And I was like, fuck, this fight's still going, you know?
Yeah.
Marcel had got me in a guillotine in the fight. And if you watch the fight, like I went unconscious from the guillotine. The ref did not stop the fight. And
Yeah.
then I guess Marcel's got tired just from holding the guillotine. And his grip loosened, and I started waking back up, and we just kept fighting. We went to decision.
So it's funny. So you guys both got knocked out in the fight.
It was a legendary fight down here in Florida. It was a great fight, and me and Marcel are still great friends. We competed two other times, like in grappling tournaments and super fights and stuff like that. And every time it was like the same way. Like I broke his ankle one of the matches, but he didn't tap out, and then he ended up winning with sweet points. You know, like he just was. This guy was like the Terminator for me, and I was like a blue belt, and he was to me he represented the generation before me, and so I was just always like I was proud to compete with him. And I always felt like, wow, if this guy is not really beating me on the ground, like he's edging me out or something, then I know at some point I'm going to be better than everyone that I go against, you know, on the ground at least. I never felt that way in kickboxing though. I always felt there was just so many guys that were so far ahead of me in kickboxing. I was a flat-footed white guy. Like it just wasn't really meant for me. I didn't think.
I understand. Now, in terms of James Waring, the guy was a cruiserweight world champion. He crossed over to do an MMA tournament. He
Yeah,
wound
he
up in a
beat Eric Paulson.
historic, yeah, he wound up in a historic fight with Eric Paulson, where with the hair pulling, it was probably the last hair pulling match, you know. But if you ever want to see what real hair pulling looks like in a fight, that's the blueprint fight. Because
Yeah.
James, you know, he had that dog. He was mean. He wanted that tournament, and he wound up fighting Henzo Gracie. So you got to give him his props as a fighter. He's all
Yeah, he
that.
made it all the way to the finals.
Yep, yep. As a fighter, he's all that. But as a ref, no, I'm not. I can't sign off on that. His refing was a little too hands off to the point where it was dangerous at times. I at one point asked the commission to not have him ref our shows anymore, even though he was kind of an icon on the Florida Commission. Um, in MMA, it didn't work. It didn't. His ground knowledge was
I
not there
remember
for it.
everyone was nervous when he was on the floor.
For sure, for sure. So now, so you take a loss to Marcel Ferreira. You've got respect for your opponent. It's not a bad loss, and like you said, that he's a generation before you. He's a more experienced guy, um, and that's on King of the Cage. So you were testing another show kind of thing. They were in Florida for that one, but you know, how was the King of the Cage organization?
It was not exactly what I expected, you know, like there were some things that were great. Like they were at the same arena where the Panthers play. It was a huge arena. It was cool to be able to fight in there. Dan Severn was the main event, which was awesome. Like I grew up watching him fight. Um, I remember seeing like a bunch of like famous fighters that I'd never met before, like Marvin Eastman and Ken Shamrock was there, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, but they also were like charging you to use the gloves, and then you had to give the gloves back. Like it was very odd. They charged you like $50 to use the gloves. They didn't pay for shit, and they were like forcing you to sell tickets to get money. Like it was a very weird experience. That was both awesome and also surprisingly low level at the same time.
Well, man, that tended to happen back then, and yeah, the truth is I feel like on our shows, like you may have sold tickets, but I don't remember ever telling you, hey, you know, I'm going to send you 50 tickets.
Nobody ever had me sell tickets, and they paid me very well, and I always had a good experience there. And you know,
And
like,
that's
and I recognize that it was, you know, funded by Dan,
yeah, and that's
and
thanks to Dan for sure.
comfortable to take a loss if he had to, and I appreciated it very much.
And yeah, no, and that's the thing is I do think that, you know, there's some fighters that are built to sell tickets also and, you know, market themselves and things like that. And then there are guys that are not, and you're applying pressure on them. And I want you ready for the fight. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't want you stressing out about other stuff. So I appreciate everything that Dan did for us there. And I think you know, I'll tell you, you remember Eddie
We
Alvarez,
always
right?
sold that place out either way, you know, like that place was always packed.
Yeah. I remember, you remember Eddie Alvarez?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Okay, so I booked him in New Jersey a lot because he's from Philly. And I remember walking down the boardwalk in Atlantic City, and his brothers and people were selling Eddie Alvarez t-shirts on the boardwalk, like bootleg like, I own the rights to his image. Like, I guess I could have blocked him from doing that, Hey, Eddie was a street kid. He was going to do it anyway. And that's how he made his money. But he knew how to market himself. And he had sellers in different neighborhoods in Philadelphia, all with a lockbox and getting tickets. And he would come in with $35,000 worth of tickets sold.
Wow.
$35,000. So yeah, so some guys are made for it, some aren't, but that's a good thing. You come back to AFC and you get another tough fight here. Now the thing that's good in retrospect is we got both of you guys early, and you're going to face another guy that actually I believe made it to the UFC, and this is a Swedish guy named David Beekelden.
Yeah, tough guy. This was an interesting fight for me.
You
Very
guys were
interesting.
a lot alike physically too, like same stature, same kind of build.
Yeah, if there was ever a fight I wish I could do again, that would be it. Like he was a really nice guy, very talented. Um, but I had just watched my coach Efren Ruiz get fucked up like right before that. And it spooked me. I don't know. I went into that fight already like shook. And yeah, I got him in a submission right away. And then he got out of it, and then he hit me, and I basically just quit. Like I just didn't feel in the fight at all. And it was horrible. I wish I could have done that one again, but it was a good experience for me to like, man, I got too ahead of myself and I just felt like I could go in there and beat anybody. And then after watching that thing happen to Efren, I go, oh my God, what if that happens to me? What if that happens to me? And I don't know, it was horrible. And I just learned like you got to stay focused before your fights. Like you can't. And I had read something an interview he had done like years later. And he's like, yeah, I had a really bad eye infection. I was almost blind in the fight. And I was so thankful that it went the way it did because he was feeling the same shit. And so, like, you don't learn this stuff till later, when you've got some experience, but everyone's going through their own battles and you have to like enjoy the journey of the fight. You can't just expect things to go exactly how you want it to go. And when it doesn't go, like, then you can't be so rigid, I guess is what I'm saying. And that fight taught me how to like go with the flow a little bit more. Um, and it was to me like I was bad on every front. Like I was embarrassed about it. Um, I was I considered quitting MMA after that. Like I was like my record's fucked up now. Like I'm not going to get to UFC. Like this isn't what I had planned for. I never planned to be like a 500 fighter. So I think I was like 3-2 at that time. And I like had a conversation with one of my old buddies who was a fighter, fought in IFL and I think fought in UFC too, Mike Cesno. And we came up together. He was fighting out of Pat Milicich's gym. And I go, yeah, dude, like if I lose my next fight, I'm quitting. Like I'm not in this just to fight. Like I want to get somewhere with this. And it was a real like soul seeking kind of experience for me, that fight. And it's the first time I had fought somebody like from out of the country. And it was like, I remember somebody came into the locker room right before the fight and they go, you're fighting that guy? Dude, that guy's crushing the pads back there. And I just saw the thing with Efren and I was like totally like mentally broken going into the fight. And it
But
showed in I got, go
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, so far in this interview, first of all, this is just your fifth fight. So you're still coming along on a learning curve and a process of putting together the package. You've already shown that at times you felt you could beat anybody in the world. I always fall back on Chris Lytle, who always says you have to have that mentality of even if you lose, I can beat anybody. You got to convince yourself that you can always win, and you already had that. Now you get to adjust it to what is a two-fight losing streak, and I've been kind of. I don't think I'm taking shots at him, but he's my example, and he's a great fighter. But Gregor Gillespie he was on a great streak. Then he got knocked out, and we haven't heard from him since. So that comeback, that keep coming back and trying again, is also special. I also want to mention something about the mindset. that Dean Thomas reminded me of last interview. Something Mike Cardozo said, who you said was a training partner of yours. Mike to me was one of those genius guys from the early days. And Dean was going to Japan to fight, I think, Uno. And he was real worried about it. And he was like, these guys are professional. These guys are, amazing. And Mike Cardozo said, they're just like us. They're just from over there.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, you're right.
really smart way of toning down the nerves and stuff. So
Smart guy, Mike Cardoso, and he's referee now in Florida also, and he's got a school down in Miami.
good, good. I'm glad to see here he's still in the game and a martial artist because from the early days, I remember him in a fight where he took a loss to a guy from Pennsylvania and Georgia on Jamie Levine's show. But he never stopped fighting. You know what I mean? It just wasn't his day kind of thing. And he impressed me. And I think he knows that I was very impressed with him and his guys, Paul Rodriguez and the guys that he had, all great guys, all great guys. So now you've got your 2 fight winning streak. You're starting to have some doubts. You go back up to Georgia for a fight with Jeff Fenno. What do you remember about this one?
This was an interesting show. So this is fighting again now for Dick Cox. And he goes, "Hey, I've got this guy for you to fight. He's like a little local legend up here, like bar fighter, beats everyone up down here. And he's like supposed to be a good striker." And I go, "Okay, like I'll fight anyone, whatever." And so I started doing interviews and stuff, and then everyone in the interviews that I'm doing it with had already interviewed him, like local radio station stuff. And they kept going, "This guy says he's going to knock you out. This guy keeps saying he's going to knock you out." And I go, I just had never experienced that before. Usually people were, back in the day, everyone was pretty respectful, you know? So I just went into that fight with a real chip on my shoulder. You can find that one on YouTube. Have you seen that fight?
No, I haven't, but
Oh,
I
you should
will.
watch this fight. It is hilarious. So, if you look up Charles McCarthy crazy ending on YouTube, you'll find it.
Okay.
And I was so pissed going into that fight, and felt like I had nothing to lose because I had gone through those 2 losses, and felt like my career was already like not going where I expected. And he came out and he threw like a couple kicks at me, and then I just grabbed him from behind standing, and I got a rear naked choke on him standing, and I just started flinging him around like an alligator. His legs were like flying all over the place, and you could hear it in the video. I was screaming, I was like, "You fucked up now!" And I fucking put him to sleep like that and just threw him off like a bag of rocks. And I like backflipped over his dead body. And then like if you go back, you can hear the video. His kids were screaming. It was horrible, like now in retrospect. But I was so pissed. Like that was like where I feel like I earned my nickname in that fight.
Yeah, I meant to ask you earlier, where did the nickname come from? How did that come about?
Cam McCarthy gave it to me when I went up and trained with him in Georgia. He was like a rock and roll drummer, like hairband style drummer.
Okay.
And I guess Wasp was a band that had a song called Chainsaw Charlie or something like that.
Okay.
And like when I started training with him and I was like ripping submissions like on everybody, he goes, "You're like a chainsaw. You're Chainsaw Charles," and just stuck after that.
Okay. That's cool. I'm proud of you because there's some guys that give themselves a nickname and some guys that get given a nickname and you got given. That's a cool thing. And for Cam to give it to you, that's not bad people to give you a nickname.
He was a legend, dude. Total legend.
No, for sure. I don't think I ever got to book him, but there was a point where he probably was one of the top 570 pounders around.
Yeah, for sure.
Back in those early days, for sure. I definitely remember him. There was a guy from that area named Chat Lavender who I used a few times. And that, I tried to diversify, so it kept me from calling Cam, but I regret it. Chat was pretty good too, but Cam was the real deal for for the 2003, 2004 era for sure. Um, so now you return back to your home show, Florida. I'm just going to mention, I know this was your rematch with Pat O'Malley. Troy Waugh refereed this fight. Troy, we recently lost Troy to brain cancer at the
Um,
beginning of this month. So, what do you remember about this fight? What do you remember about Troy?
Well, Troy was like the first real referee in Florida, I feel like when Florida started doing MMA, it was really a bunch of boxing guys that um were put in charge of MMA. And they were nice guys, but they didn't know really anything. And so like when Troy would be there, you would feel at least like a good sense of like the guy who's reffing this fight really knows what's happening and you can trust that he's going to do a good job with it. And Troy like was reffing like Abu Dhabi and stuff like that. Like he was a very smart guy. Um, and yeah, I remember I was going through like trying to get an opponent for that fight, and I think it was
Who were some
Carlos
of the
called.
original opponents? You remember some of the original opponents?
I don't remember
Okay, no
really.
problem. I don't either. So
I just remember like the number. It was like 13 guys that I had agreed to, like told I was gonna fight, and then within some period of time, like it was off. So I go, listen, I will fight anyone. And he goes, well, you could fight this guy, or I have Pat O'Malley wants to fight you again also. And I go, well, if I was Pat O'Malley, I'd want to fight me again too. And I feel like if I beat a guy, that guy shouldn't want to fight me again. So like that fight didn't go like as convincing as I wanted it to. Like, let me give Pat a shot back. And
that's honorable.
yeah, so I just thought that was the right thing to do. And Pat was willing to step up and take the fight. So that's what we did. And I got the win on that one the way I had wanted to.
What happened in the fight? What do you remember?
We clinched up pretty early, like same way he knocked me down the first time, and this time I was able to like take him down. And then took his back and pounded him out a little bit and choked him out. It was pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, Pat's one of those guys that kind of is all in from the beginning of the fight. I don't remember too many of his going to a decision, so it makes sense.
Yeah, that's how all my fights went too. So it was you knew it was going to be exciting when I was going against Pat.
Now you came back the very next AFC 10, and now you fight one of those guys who's from New England, a New England legend named Keith Raquel. And, it's because of Keith Raquel, as an elder statesman of the fight, Keith Raquel helped train Jason DeLucia, for the early UFCs and stuff.
And
And
Mike Brown too.
yeah, he bought us Mike Brown, actually. He came with Mike Brown out to do his debut in Hook and Shoot. And Keith held one of the belts for Hook and Shoot for a long time. Definitely an excellent fighter, a really fit, strong guy. I wonder who was stronger in this one, you or him, because I don't know if you could really pick it in this one, because he was that kind of guy, like a real workhorse.
There's a piece. And technically good too.
Yeah, very good. What was your impression? What do you remember about this fight? You got him. You got
I was
quick.
really like I had gotten like my streak going again. I had gotten connected with Joe Silva, who was a matchmaker UFC at the time. And I was like, hey, like I really want to fight for you. They're offering me these guys. Which one of these guys, if I beat them, would get me to you? And Keith was one of the guys. There's a couple other names that were being tossed around. And so he goes, well, if you beat Keith Raquel, I would sign you. And I think that was right. Keith had fought like Eugene Jackson in UFC. And he was a stud. So I was like, I didn't really think much about him like as a fighter. I was just like, this is the fight that'll get me where I want to get. So I took the fight. And yeah, I started watching all the film on him, and I was watching it with my friends, and my friends looked at him, they go, you're fighting that guy? Like he was so impressive looking. He was so jacked, like he was in great shape. He looked really talented, like in the ground and the feet. And so like he had fought like in Pancrase and been all over. So
And he also had a really methodical style where you didn't see him in fights take a lot of damage. Not until he got to fight like I also put him in with like Dennis Kang and a few guys that were a little bit closer to him his level. But if he outclassed you, you weren't going to get an inch on him.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the fight went good for me. There was definitely some adversity, and this is where like I had to dig deep, like when things weren't going exactly the way I wanted. Um, I think I ended up finishing him in the second round by armbar. But it was a challenge. Like I had gotten first round, I had gotten all kinds of positions on him. took him down, got him in a knee bar, some other stuff, but he got out. And then when he got out of that knee bar, I was so tired from trying to hit that knee bar. I was like, man, I hope I didn't blow all my energy on that. And then the next round came and he was doing a lot better that round. And then I just like gutted through it and pulled off that armbar. I hit like a nice sweep armbar that I got from the bottom on him. And yeah, he was very strong. I remember I became good friends with Jorge Rivera, who was his one of his
Yep.
students at the time. And he told me like years and years after, he goes, man, Keith just couldn't stop talking about how strong you were. He couldn't believe how strong you were. So like I had felt that he was strong, but I didn't feel like he was stronger than me, but I felt that he had a lot more experience than me, and I felt it in the fight. Like I felt him making good decisions in the fight that I wasn't expecting, things I wasn't prepared for. Um, and he was so nice after the fight too, like he
Yeah.
was like he I was such a fan, I was like, man, how was it fighting in Pancrase? Like, like what was it like fighting in Japan? He goes, oh, you would do fine over there. And I don't know why, but when he told me that, I felt so like when he said something, you just believed it. You go, oh man, he thinks I would do good over there. All right, that's really nice to hear that. You know what I mean?
Well, Keith was a guy that, my hat's off to him. He's not a Dan Lambert, but he wasn't poor either. Like when we took his guys to Indiana, he covered the plane tickets for his
Oh,
team.
really? What was his background? I didn't know that.
I believe he had an electric company, like he was an electrician by trade, and had a nice company long running and stuff. So he wasn't worried about a $500 plane ticket, and he would
Oh,
take
interesting.
these guys plane tickets and not never hassle us or anything like that in terms of that. So he's a guy that deserves respect on many levels. That kind of contribution is what got us to where we are here at the sport now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Is guys that sacrifice and Keith definitely sacrificed on more levels than one, just not only in the ring. So my hat's off to him. He's a great guy. Now you're in a situation where you're a man with 2, 3 fight winning streaks. Now the question is, can you break through and win a fourth fight in a row? Now for AFC 11, you get a guy named Sean Salih, who's got an upside down record when you look at it, but he was one of those kind of like confident guys that will fight anybody, and sometimes those guys are real dangerous. And he had a fight record where he fought guys like Stefan Bonner,
Yeah, he
before
fought
you, and
everybody,
Kai
right?
Club, and Kevin Jordan, who was there were good guys that he fought. And later on down the line, as his record, continued to not improve, he still fought great guys. He fought Luigi, he fought good guys, solid guys the whole way through his career. But he ran into the Chainsaw, and Chainsaw got his fourth win in a row for the first time. What did this fight feel like for you?
I remember him being really tall, and they told me he was like a wrestling coach, like at a college or something like that. So I was like, all right, well, this will be a good challenge, Like I, there wasn't like it wasn't easy to get video on guys back then. It wasn't like everyone's fights were on YouTube; you could just watch them. So like you just kind of like would figure like that was a fight where I figured it out as I went. Um, I was able to get the clinch, get takedown on him. I remember getting mount on him, and he like tied me up by like wrapping his arms around me. His arms were really long, so I couldn't break his grip. And so I ended up doing something I'd never trained before, but I like postured up and I just kept slamming him over and over, like with my shoulder in his jaw. And then he like opened up, and then I think I got an armbar on him shortly after that.
Okay,
Very
so
nice
that's
guy too. He was one of those Indiana guys, right? Am I wrong about
yep,
that?
yep. He's out of Indianapolis, yeah, for sure. Now we roll back, and now you go back to Georgia. You get a fight at something called Full Throttle against Timothy Williams.
Yeah, that was for Brett Moses again. Yeah.
Now, what was this like? Because this was April 21st, and about 5 weeks later, you make your UFC debut. So, had you gotten a call from UFC? Did they tell you win one more? What was the deal going into this fight? Were you at risk of when you fought Timothy Williams? Were you worried that you might not get your UFC shot if you lost?
Um, I don't remember exactly. It's a good question. There were so few UFCs back then. There was like a UFC every 2 months, and they didn't always bring new people in every UFC. So it was like six guys might get in a year. So I didn't want to like just sit around and wait, based on that Joe told me he would put me in. So I just kept fighting, and Timothy Williams was an interesting character. He was like talking to himself at the weigh-ins. I think definitely probably had some mental health issues. I can't say for sure, like I don't want to call him out like that, but he was he'd fought a lot of really good guys, and they all warned me that he like fouls all the time, like hit you in the balls, like poke you in the eyes, like whatever he had to do. So for that fight, Forrest Griffin was my referee. And I knew Forrest, and I go, "Hey, Forrest, if anything happens, like he fouls me for any reason, don't stop it. Like I'm just gonna keep going. Like I don't want to count. I just want to keep going through the fight. Like I don't want him to be able to take timeouts. And it's the only fight video I don't actually have. I never got to see the video from it. Um, I hit him with a left hook and dropped him pretty early in the fight, and then yeah, he was just talking to himself the whole time, even in the fight. And then he like kicked me square in the balls, like sure enough. And Forrest looked at me and I go, no, like keep it going. And then I don't remember how the fight finished either. It's like because I never got to see it again. I don't really remember it that much. I remember I finished him probably in the first round.
Yeah, first round, 2 minutes, 33 seconds submission armbar is what Sure Dog says.
I'll take it. Sounds good.
Yep, yep. So now, like I said, 5 weeks later, you'll be making your UFC debut, UFC 53. Talk about getting the phone call from Joe Silva.
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling, like something I had worked so hard for. What year are we in now?
2005, June 2005.
So figure this
19.
is 5 years of work like I had been putting in, and I mean, it was a lot, like I had really believed in the process that I would get there. So when it happened, I wasn't like surprised per se, and I had been talking to Joe Silva a lot on the phone prior to that. Um, and it just felt I was on that win streak. I just felt like it was natural, like it was supposed to happen. I was gonna go in there and I was gonna dominate and get to my UFC title shot, and like that was history. Like I was signed on for that. I remember they were asking me about the fight. I was fighting Dave Loazo, who was like a Taekwondo national champion out of Canada, and he was just a very accomplished fighter. And I remember saying like, I'm just gonna take him down and submit him in the first round. Like I'm gonna smoke this guy. I fully believed it. And he was real famous for opening up cuts on guys, hitting him with these huge elbows. And he is another guy. Like I learned a lot from that fight. He was throwing these crazy kicks, like as they would fly by me, I'd hear them. Woof. I like ducked a few of them. I was able to take him down and get his back real early in the fight and control him through the first round. Um, but he had this move that he would do that like people do it now, but he was really the inventor of it, where like I would mount him and then he would give his back and then roll over, and like jujitsu guys would stay on the back. But now, like I teach guys, no, if they roll over, go back to mount. Don't go underneath them to the back, because then if he escapes that, he's on top of you. But nobody was teaching that back then. So he did that to me a couple times and got on top of me and hit me with these horrible elbows. And I was like, all right, I learned a little bit from that. And then I think it was second round, he ended up finishing me with a spinning heel kick, liver kick. And
Yeah.
that was like a legendary finish that they played in the UFC, like the greatest hits. It was like if you went to a UFC live event, that would be at the pre-roll, him knocking me out with that. He hit me with this killer spinning back kick to the liver and a flying knee afterwards. And like he got on top of me, started hitting me, and I was like telling John, I go, don't stop it, but I couldn't move. I was like frozen from the liver shot. And then they stopped it. And then like 2 seconds later, I got up and I like had no pain, no injuries. And I was so frustrated, that they had stopped the fight. But um, yeah, I learned a lot from that one. I learned my striking still sucked. I learned that don't go underneath a guy when he gives you that. Like, don't take the bait. Like you can't finish everybody right away, and you need to be more patient. Like those were good lessons for me for sure.
Now, you know, obviously you've got, the focus. You've been going for 5 years now, trying to get to this spot and things. It doesn't go your way. and you get a highlight reel kind of not in your favor kind of thing. What did that do to you? Did it motivate you to come back and get one, you know?
Well, it was interesting because he was already a really like accomplished guy. He was one of St. Pierre's training partners, and everyone knew how good he was. So the fact that I had come in, took him down real easy, got his back, mounted him, was in control most of the fight, like I think it gave me more confidence than it took. You know,
Okay.
like I was aware you could get hit and it could change a fight. So he hit me with a spinning back kick, it changed the fight. But like if you look at the totality of the fight, I felt like I had dominated most of the fight. And so, back then UFC also was going through this weird phase where they were only doing one fight deals. They weren't doing like multi-fight deals. So everyone came up to me after the fight, like Matt Serra came up to me, he goes, told me like, man, you have really great jujitsu. That was impressive. Like Dana White said some real nice stuff to me. Like, and so I felt motivated to keep pushing through and keep improving and getting better. It wasn't like the same kind of feeling that I had when I'd lost to like Beagleton. It was a different feeling for sure.
Okay, yeah, and now you're on the biggest stage. This is UFC 53 for the newer people now. Describe like the arena, because obviously Dana was already there. They'd had it for close to 20 shows at this point. So it was already, starting to maybe ramp up, but it's still not what it is today. Talk about the arena and the whole treatment and the feeling and everything like that.
It's interesting you say that. So before that fight, one of my friends, who you probably know him, Joe Cavallero, Joe Cav, he was managing Marcus Davis at the time.
Okay.
And he's
The
like,
Irish Hangman.
he was good friends with Dana. And he's like, Charles, they're going to do this reality show called The Ultimate Fighter. He goes, you should get on there. I can get you on there, no problem. You'll be in the first season and you'll go from there and then get into the UFC. And I was like, Joe, I'm going to get to UFC. Like they already told me I'm going in. I don't want to go in because I was on a reality show, which was one of the biggest bonehead moves of my life. I should have definitely gone on that first season of Ultimate Fighter. It was like it made huge stars at all those guys. Um, but yeah, like I get to the UFC. It was at like Trump Taj Mahal, I want to say,
Okay.
and in Atlantic City, and it was just a cool experience. I saw like Andrei Arlovsky walking around and all these big name fighters that I'd only ever seen on TV. And I was a fan first, way before I was a fighter. So I was just like meeting everyone, getting it was so cool that I had access to everywhere, you know what I mean? So then like the fight happens and I got to like be cage side for the whole rest of the fights, and it was just such a cool experience. Like the whole UFC experience back then was like, I mean, it was still a ton of people there. It was well over 10,000 people there, and I had never fought in anything like that before. It was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. I think I made $2,000 that night for that fight.
Yeah, no, for
It
sure.
was
That's
still a lot of money for back then. I was making 2,000 fighting for AFC. So like to fight there for $2,000, and I had to get like all these medicals for Jersey. I ended up losing money for that fight, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, I believe it. A lot of people have that same story from that era where, the paychecks weren't there and that sort of thing. Um, a business question. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to get into the conversation, but are you one of the people in the class action lawsuit?
Oh man, I wish. I wish those guys are gonna get so paid. I'm not getting anything.
Your time came before the statutes of
Yeah, some of the
limitation.
guys I've trained that are gonna get paid pretty well, I'm expecting.
Okay, good, good. Well, it's a shame that you won't get a piece of that, but it would have been interesting to head into that discussion. But so now you go back to something. I think you're back in Georgia. Was that your first fight outside of Florida and Georgia in the Trump Taj?
Yeah, I guess so. No, I'd done that Alabama fight on the border of Georgia, but yeah, like my first fight out of the region.
Okay, that's cool, cool. Now you go, I think, back to Georgia for something called Full Throttle 3 and 4. So you fight back-to-back fights. One of these shows had a fight that was pretty legendary at the time where Rafael Assunção beat George Masvidal. Both guys obviously now UFC veterans and stuff like that.
Close
Um,
fight too. Fight could have went either way. It was really close. I was managing George for that fight and set him up for that matchup.
yeah, and Asuncion was no joke though, for sure.
Oh yeah, great guy. I became good friends with him and his brother as well.
And you fought Mike Van Meer, and this was round two, armbar at 4 minutes. So he took you 9 minutes. So what do you remember about this fight?
So this was against a guy named Minivan. That was his nickname, and he was like 5'1" or something, 5'3". I don't know. He was very short, and he was like this stout, like short guy. And I go, this fight, I'm gonna take it really slow, and I'm gonna just try to like pick him apart on the feet and really like get some experience kickboxing. Because after that fight with the Crow, like Lawaza, I go, I really need to get my kickboxing better. And all the videos I'd watched of Minivan were one way, and then when the fight starts, he started orthodox, but then he switched right away to southpaw, and it fucked my head up because I go, he didn't never fought southpaw in any of these fights I'd watched. So then I really didn't train for a southpaw at all, and I wasn't good enough kickboxer to deal with that really. And he was throwing these huge like haymakers the whole fight, and I was like touching him up on the feet, but it wasn't the kickboxing like extravaganza I was hoping it was going to be. And so the crowd started like booing a little bit, and I go, all right, well fuck this, and I just took him down and submitted him really quickly. Like I knew I could do that at any moment, so I was just trying to like get some ring experience in there for the fight. But yeah, no, my shitty ass kickboxing showed through again there.
Okay, but that's you're trying to solve the problem. You know what I mean? So it shows that's why you have a gym now, and you're kind of, I classify you as a lifelong martial artist kind of guy, because you're working through the problems. Now, the next fight, I would classify something weird. You come back to Fight Party 4, and you fight a guy named Trevor Garrett, and
Oh,
I,
interesting fight. I got a good story for this one.
just to tell the people, it looks like Charles got caught in a guillotine kind of quick, which, at this point in his career is really unusual. What do you remember?
It was a fight that was set up for me to win. Um, I was set to get married, and I needed some money to pay for the wedding. So I go, hey Brett, can you put me on that fight card? Because I'm getting married the next week. Like I would like to make some money to pay for the wedding. And he goes, Charles, that's a terrible idea. And I go, no, I'll be fine. Like, like he goes, okay, well, I've got this guy, Trevor Garrett, will take the fight. I think he had a pretty mixed record. Um, Very impressive looking guy though, but like he had a lot of holes in his game. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to get married the next week. My fiance at the time goes, just don't get any black eyes for the pictures or anything like that. So I go, okay, the fight starts, and I just shot in on him right away because I didn't want to get hit at all. And I shot in on him, took him down, and he had me in a guillotine, but he was like in butterfly guard. And I go, I was just so stupid, I was so like arrogant. And I go, this guy can't submit me. And the next thing I know, I was waking up like they had, I've gotten completely choked unconscious from his butterfly guard. So, it just goes to show you, like, um, you don't really know what's going to happen in life. You got to be more willing to accept the fact that other people have wills as well, and they're going to push hard to make what they want to have happen. And you don't just get to do what you want, and that's what I learned that.
At least you didn't get a black eye.
I did not have a black eye for the wedding, and I got the $2,000 something,
Now, you had said that you regret not taking the opportunity for being in the Ultimate Fighter season one. Obviously, the Ultimate Fighter became kind of an iconic show, and by season four, it was really starting to roll along like pretty good. And I believe season four was labeled the comeback. So this was a show with all UFC veterans. Um, what do you remember about being in the house? Well, first the phone call. How did you get on there? Did you already coming off a loss? It still took you, so you probably had
Yeah.
impressed them enough, right?
Yeah, I had been talking to Joe Silva a lot about trying to get Cole Miller into UFC. I had him on a nice win streak. He was doing great. And so when Joe called me up, he's like, "Hey, like I want to talk to you about Ultimate Fighter." And I go, "Oh, you want to call an Ultimate Fighter? I think that would be a great idea." And he goes, "No, I want to talk to you about you and the Ultimate Fighter." And I go, "Well, I've already fought in UFC. Like, how are you going to do that?" He goes, then he explained the premise of the season. And I go, "Who's going to be in it?" And he goes, Matt Lemlin's going to be in there. Uh, Nick Diaz is going to be in there. And he started naming off all these big names who didn't end up being in there. For whatever reason, they dropped out like right before. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Because, well, first I was like, I didn't really want to be in the house, like it seemed like a miserable experience to me. And then they were like, he's like, well, if you win it, you'll get a title shot. And then you'll also get 250 grand. And I was like, okay, sign me up. I'll do it. Like for 250 grand and a title shot, I think I'd have done anything. So yeah, I went out there and did the show. It was weird experience, I would say, being on a reality TV show. Like you learn a lot about the inner workings of it. They made it so you couldn't like read books, couldn't like talk on the phone, you couldn't play Uno. They took the Uno cards away from us. You couldn't listen to the radio. And with the idea that they want you to be really just agitated all the time, so you create drama with each other and fight with each other. And so that happened a lot while we were there. And I made some really good friends from the show, but I remember not enjoying the experience very much while I was there.
Yeah,
Probably
you
would
have.
enjoy it a lot more now in my 40s, like to be able to just take 6 weeks off and not do anything. But in my
Yeah,
20s, I felt cooped up and like I was in prison.
yeah. No, you seem, like I don't know if private person is the right word, but like it's really an invasion of privacy, and you really got to, some guys totally embrace it, other guys just don't like it. You know what I
I had
mean?
never planned or wanted to be on TV, like even like fighting on TV. It was because I wanted to fight, like the being on TV part. Yeah, I think you nailed it pretty good. I'm a pretty private person and I didn't like it just wasn't for me. I'm not like a lot of guys they went on that show, like Shoney Carter was on there with me, and he was just like hamming it up for the cameras everywhere. He loved it.
Yeah,
I was like the complete opposite end of the spectrum of that. Like I didn't want to be on the cameras. I didn't. They were like, "Who wants to do this product placement?" And everyone would step forward, and I would take a step backwards. Like I just didn't. It didn't appeal to me. I was a software developer. Like I was like, I remember that's what I did to pass time in there. I was like writing code like on paper.
yeah. That's funny. That is funny. Now, I remember Shayna Baszler told a story of where they asked her, you know, they pull her aside, when they're doing the talking heads, and the question is simply, um, talk about how your fight would go if it went perfectly for you, or how any fight would go for you. Just describe the perfect fight for yourself, right? So it's like, well, I'm gonna go in and I kill my opponent. She talks herself up and things, and then they take that clip and they put it as her pre-fight talk for the actual fight. Did
They
did,
do.
did you
That's what,
experience anything like that?
oh my God, everything was like that. They had scripts like on week one of like how the whole season was gonna go. Like this guy does this guy does like they were gonna set all these things up to happen. You just didn't know it, like they had already planned out a lot of the season before it happened. Like not necessarily over who's gonna win the fights or not, but like, yeah, I mean there was one scene that was like with Pete Spratt and Rich Clementi and they like had chopped it up in a way where it looked like we were all having this group conversation and there were people in that clip that were not even there for the conversation but they had clipped them into it like as if they were part of it, and there's just a reality TV show is a strange thing, dude. I don't know if they really do it anymore that much, but back then it was like there was so huge reality TV.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean they have writers, like it's not as real as you think it's going to be. Like we did fight each other. Like those were real things.
yeah. Now let me ask you. Now it's funny because I'm looking at the lineup here, and I could almost guess. So you mentioned, Shoney Carter was a big fan of the cameras. I bet Clementi wasn't bad on camera because he's got.
He loved it. Oh, he was there to get famous. Yeah.
Now,
Good guy. Yeah, I like Rich. Yeah.
there's another guy on here who I would put on your end of the spectrum, and he's a good friend of mine too. Is Travis Luter.
Oh, great friend of mine. Yeah, Travis is just like me in that sense. He became my best friend through that show, and we would just play chess all day, every day. You know, he's the reason why I opened my first gym. He was running a successful gym, and he like basically gave me the business model for it. We talked about it for the 6 weeks, and then when I left there, I took the money from the show and I opened the first gym.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, Travis is a guy that always impressed me. He came and won the Abu Dhabi trials on my show.
His
When he went
jiu-jitsu,
to
good dude.
Abu Dhabi, that was his first appearance ever everywhere. And even back then, he's one of those quiet, confident guys that thinks he can beat everybody, which is a trait we've talked about that you kind of have to have, And what
He was
impressed me about him is he always had the same answer. It's like, so he never said, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to arm bar him. I'll choke him. I'll punch him, knock him out or anything like that. What he said was, I'll beat him, like, so it gave me that feeling of like, he'll do whatever it takes. And Travis is one of the most impressive guys on that show. He went on to
he
came within
almost
a
won the
hair's
title.
breadth of
Yeah, within an inch.
Anderson. So yeah, Anderson Silva mounted.
Yeah, Travis was something else, man. Really good, and he improved my jiu-jitsu a lot from that show. Like I felt like I could beat anyone, and then I rolled with him, and like he would edge me out a lot of the times that we would roll, and like I had some good moments against him too, but it was like his technique was so superior, and I remember thinking to myself, man, I got to get where he's at with the technique. Like he was so good, and he was always very open to sharing and helping and improving. And yeah, he's a real gift, like a great person for sure.
Yeah, Carlos Machado black belt. And he got it right from the source from Carlos himself.
He's a
So
really good wrestler.
definitely shows. Now another uh, kind of genius um, jujitsu person on the show, Matt Serra was there. Matt Serra
Yeah.
actually won it and then went on to beat George St. Pierre, I believe, in the title shot. So
Yep.
he made the
Sure.
most out of his appearance there. Well, what was your impression of Matt?
I loved him, and I still do. I think he's great. Like he was one of the funniest people I ever met. Um, I was already a huge fan of his from his Shoney Carter fight and his appearance at Abu Dhabi, and so I was following him before, and then when I had fought my first UFC fight, he'd come backstage and said some really nice stuff to me, and so I went in there being a fan of his already, and um, yeah, he just has amazing leadership skills, great person, really kind, funny, super talented, and overachiever. Like he's not built like anybody should ever be a world champion, but he still made it happen.
Yeah. Now, since we're listing off some of the nice guys on there, I'd be remiss if I missed out on Chris Lytle, who lost to Matt in the finals.
Okay.
I believe they had a rematch that Chris won, and Chris always says, he lost in the finals meant everything with the contract, with the title
It was
shot.
everything. And that fight could have went either way too. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't like a clear cut win for either guy. It was a very close fight.
Yeah, and Chris was one of those guys too that I think had the right focus for the TV show because he said he's a professional. He had a ton of fights already. Also had a wife and kids, and he's like, I'm not going on the show to be a clown. You know what I mean? So he was a real pro. What was your impression of Chris? Because Chris has also got a very different ground game, but he's pretty
He's
stick.
a talented guy, really good boxer, like good everything. Um, and I was a fan of his too. And I remember I really pissed off Matt Serra, and he stuck to this for all the way into the end of the show. When we first got in there, I was young and I just didn't really have a filter, and so I would just talk about things in front of people that you probably shouldn't ever let outside of your own head. And I remember talking to Matt, and I go, yeah, well, like, if you're like an odds maker and you're writing betting lines and stuff, you would put Chris Lytle as a favorite to win your division. And it really rubbed him the wrong way. And I remember after he won the whole thing, he goes, Chris Lytle, huh? Like he was so like adamant that he was gonna win. And like that's the same thing that Chris told you. Like everyone will tell you like that's ever fought at that level. Like you have to believe that you can win against any odds. Like those odds they just don't know you, the odds makers. Like you've got what it takes to win. And so, Matt was like the ultimate of that. Like he just really believed that he could do anything, and he did. Like he knocked out George St. Pierre was like the most shocking thing ever. And to him, I don't think it was that shocking. Like he believed he was going to win that fight.
Yeah, yeah. Now we've got who hit you the wrong way on this show? Who didn't you like as much?
I don't know that I had people I didn't like as much. There were some guys I didn't get along with as well. Like I felt like I don't know, we were all different, like different ages and stuff like that. And so like I remember not like having the best jive with like Pete Spratt. Even though I was a huge fan of his and he was really talented. Um, then like I was really good friends with like Mikey Burnett and Jorge Rivera at the beginning. And then by the end I wasn't getting along with him at all. It was a weird 6 weeks, but now like in retrospect, I have fun feelings for all of them.
Yeah, yeah. Now, did you have trouble with the coaching? Because sometimes, I always found that to be one of the real uh X factors in the TV show is, you go over there and you get kind of get given a coach, or coach picks you for his
They didn't
team
really
and
do
stuff.
that for
If
us.
that goes wrong for you, it sucks.
They didn't really do that for us. They did something different for us where we had like visiting coaches. Every week you'd have a new guy there. So like Randy Couture was one of them. Um, I want to say Matt Hughes was one of them. Rich Franklin was there. Chuck Liddell. Like so, it was like more like you're just like meeting your idols, and you're getting to learn like their little each one of them's individual secrets. It was awesome. I think I really enjoyed that part of it.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
How
like
was
I
Mark
felt
Lehman?
very alone out there. Like when I was fighting, I didn't feel like I had anyone I could trust in my corner. But it's like that's I don't know. You're always alone in there. Like you just got to fight.
How was Mark Lehman? He was one of the guest coaches, another jujitsu wizard.
People hated him. I loved Mark Lehman. I think Matt Serra really hated him, but he was fucking good. And I watched him roll a lot. He was so good. And I think him and Travis Luter, like Travis didn't like him that much. And so they didn't train together, but I would have loved to have watched those guys roll. Mark Lehman was good, dude. He was
Yeah,
really good.
yeah. No, Mark was the real deal. We got to take him to Abu Dhabi a few times, and some people criticize him because he didn't do MMA, and but he can be very opinionated and stuff.
Very
But
opinionated. Actually pissed people off. Yeah.
yeah, but he's as elite as they come in terms of on the ground. So
Absolutely. Yeah. He was good. Matt Serra used to call him Lemon. I remember that.
now you got your fight with Pete Spratt in on this Ultimate Fighter show. What was the build up to this? What went on in Pete is
So
it Pete Bell rather?
No, I
Did I say
fought. Yeah, not
Spratt?
Pete Spratt. Pete Spratt was in the lighter weight class.
Yeah, Pete Sell. I'm sorry, and Pete Sell, I believe, is a Sarah teammate, right?
Yeah, he was one of Sarah's guys, and he had come off a big win against Phil Baroni, where he choked out Phil Baroni. Um, and he was tough, dude. Very strong, uh, and explosive, tough guy. And yeah, I ended up losing in overtime to him. He got one round, I got one round, and then he'd won the overtime decision or something like that. Yeah, it wasn't my
Now,
best performance at all. I remember like it's so weird being there for all those weeks, and then like every single guy was trying to like help me, but each guy was giving me completely different advice. By the time I fought, I was so confused on what I should be doing for my striking. Like I just didn't. I think I threw one punch the whole fight, and I like busted his eye with the punch, but like that was it. I only threw one punch the whole fight, like on the feet. It was a very odd fight for me.
that
Normally,
that
I would swing punches, like even though I wasn't good, I was throwing, but I just was trying. I couldn't get my footwork right. Like it just felt odd that fight.
it's like a being in the house and all you're talking about is fights and fights and fights and fights. Is that part of it? You're overthinking, or didn't work for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I sucked that fight. I don't look back at that fight thinking I did real good. And I remember Matt Serra goes to me afterwards. He goes, "Man, Charles, you threw one punch and you like cut his eye open. Like if you had just done that more, like you'd had a much better fight. Like and he was telling me that, and Pete was his own guy, like I just,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Like I just didn't feel like Pete surprised me. He was so strong. I really was like surprised how strong he was. Hit me with like a really cool like takedown at the beginning of the fight. Then like somewhere in the second round, like maybe it was the first round, I got him in a heel hook, and then he turned out of it, and I went into like a knee compression lock, and he exploded out of it, and I tore my MCL on my knee. And so like I remember I felt it pop, and I go, oh, and I like kind of curled up for a second, and he started cracking me, and I go, well, I'm still alive, like, and I just kept fighting back, and we kept going, like, but I did tear my knee there, and I just, I don't know, that fight sucked. Like, I didn't feel like myself at all in that fight. And that was most fights. I never really felt like completely comfortable in my fights. It didn't really happen a lot for me in my fights. I think that's why I like with my guys now, I put them through so many amateur fights before I turn them pro. Because it
Yeah.
takes a long time to like come into your own like skin in fighting. Some guys are naturally were amazing. Like Masvidal was always like that. It was great, but
Yeah. No,
for other
I
it's time.
earlier in the interview that you kind of made it to the UFC pretty early in your first 10 fights, which, especially back in those days, was unusual. They usually ask guys to have really full resumes. So, I think you're kind of still developing at this point in the normal way of
I was in
looking.
a rush. I don't know what it was. It's like I looked at point A and point B, and I go, I need to go straight.
No, and that's a good thing. I mean, having a goal and making the goal is also, satisfying as a man kind of thing too. So I'm not knocking it, and I'm glad that it happened for you that way. But I always thought like, for example, a guy like Cody Garbrandt, I don't think they really did him a favor putting him in a title fight in like his 10th fight. He won it and he held the title, but then after that things caught up to him quickly, and he got a losing streak, and I thought he might have deserved a little more nurturing. But um, well, looking back at it, you get called into the Ultimate Fighter finale. Where was the finale? What channel? Where was it shown? Because these were on
This was
Spike TV still.
Yeah, these were on Spike. And I fought the finale against Gideon Ray. It was in the Palms in Las Vegas. Uh, Interesting venue, like the way the way it was backstage was we were basically in the same room as our opponent, and they separated us by one of those like cloth black like things, separators. So you basically see your opponent like warming up. I see Gideon just crushing the pads back there, like throwing these wicked kicks and stuff. So yeah, it was interesting. But I had trained with Gideon. He was on my team. And I remember Joe Silva called me. He goes, Charles, I never quite had this happen before, but every guy said they want to fight you. He goes, so you pretty much can pick whoever you want to fight because they all want to fight you. He goes, I don't know what you did, but you rubbed everyone the wrong way, one way or another. So with Gideon, I had eaten like his soy milk with my cereal, and it pissed him off that like I basically went into the fridge and was just raiding his food. And I didn't really think much of it because we didn't pay for the food. We just wrote on the list what we wanted, and it would show up the next day. So I just treated it like community food when I would get hungry. So I remember he goes to me, he goes, hey, McCarthy. I go, yeah. He goes, you drink cow's milk? And I go, I thought it was an odd question. I go, yeah, I guess so. He goes, so why do you drink my soy milk? And I go, oh, my bad, dude. I didn't really think anything of it. But then at the end of the show, apparently he was so pissed off about it still that he wanted to fight me. And I was like, yeah, we'll fight Gideon. Like I felt like that was a good fight for me, like he had a great record and he great kickboxer, but I just felt like I knew what I could do to him, which I did end up doing to him. I tore my ACL 5 weeks out from that fight training with Dennis Kang. Um, Sorry, my kid's going through all my shit. Yeah, I was 5 weeks out from the fight, and someone had given me some new wrestling shoes. I was wearing them for the training. I threw a kick at Dennis Kang. Dennis Kang took me down, and my knee exploded, and tore my ACL, LCL, MCL, and meniscus all in one go. And I was like, "Fuck," like. But I had committed to opening the gym, like, and I had already like signed a lease. Like, there was already stuff in place, and I was relying on the money from that fight. And so I was like, I'm just gonna figure it out. So I just trained a bunch of half guard and swam for the whole camp. And then I went into that fight, and you'll see I fought southpaw for that fight. I'd never trained or fought southpaw my whole life, and I just waited for my waited for my opportunity. And then when the right opportunity came, I took him down and finished him off.
Yeah. Now, um, there were a couple of things. First of all, you said you hurt your MCL in the finale fight with Pete Sell.
Yeah,
Um,
I just started getting a lot of knee injuries towards the end of my career. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to stop. I just was having a hard time getting through camps and stuff without tearing my knees.
okay. And how did it go? So you lose to Pete. Do you have to stay in the house or
Yes. Oh my God, yes. It was horrible. You're like the worst feeling in the world when you lose. You want to shell up and not see anyone at all. But for some people, they were happy. They go, "Oh, I'm going to be on TV for 13 weeks no matter what." But since I didn't want to be on TV, that was like torture for me having to be there after that. But it was towards the end of the filming, so it wasn't too long. I think it was like 2 more weeks I had to be in the house.
okay. And then you go home and there's still a few months before the finale, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it was like 2 months or something.
Okay, now it's a long time ago. Be honest with me. Uh, They make you not tell anybody the results, right? So did you
Yeah, right. You
tell
sign
your
like a
wife? Did you tell a
$5
training
NDA.
partner? Did you tell anyone?
Um, it's a good question. I don't know. Like I didn't tell anyone I won. I know that. Like like my wife at the time knew like that I didn't win, but she didn't know any of the people on the show, so she wouldn't care. And I don't know. I don't think I did. They really scared the life out of you, with that like $5 million NDA that you signed.
Wow, $5 million is what they're gonna ask you for if you break the non-disclosure, huh?
I'd still be paying that.
Yeah, and it's for sure, for sure. Now, so you beat Gideon Ray. Now, did you retire after that fight? You had the knee injuries. You were opening a gym. You did come back for another fight, but it was more than a year later. In your mind, was the Gideon Ray going out with a win? Was that kind of the end of it for a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking exactly. Like I'd gotten that win, felt good, like getting that UFC victory and making a little bit of money, getting the gym running. I had just had my oldest son at the time. What year was that fight with Gideon Ray?
2006, November of 2006.
Okay, so I had my first son in 2007, and so after that fight with Gideon, I went and got knee surgery like that weekend. So like I had went from the fight, and I flew to Atlanta, and Dr. Keating, who was a fight doctor out of Atlanta, did my knee surgery. Um, and it was like a 12-month recovery. And I remember I was like talking to Joe Silva, and he's like, "Who do you want to fight next?" And I was like, "I want to fight whoever gets me to the title next." I go, and then if I win, I'm fighting for the title, and if I don't win, then I'll reassess everything. I go, I want to fight Evan Tanner next. If I can't fight Evan Tanner, then whoever will get me there. And he goes, well, I've got Michael Bisping coming down from 205, and that would be a really impressive win, like to take Michael Bisping out. And I go, sign me up, I'm in. So he'd set that fight up, and I think it was like originally scheduled for like November or something like that. And my niece healing was terrible. It just was not really getting a lot better. And I was like, fuck it, we're just gonna go and do it. And then the fight got postponed. It was originally, I think, supposed to be in England. And then
Okay.
it got postponed for a couple months. And I think I ended up fighting like in January or February in Montreal.
April 2008.
April. Okay. So my months are a little bit off, but it gave me like 2 more months to heal from my knee injury, which helped a lot. Um, and then I didn't really feel it that much going into the fight. Like I didn't feel like that was a factor in that fight. He was just better fighter than I expected. I got early takedown on him like I usually do. Got a huge slam on him. I was able to mount him right away. Was able to get an armbar on him, and he just was really clever at how he used the cage to get out of the armbar. And I remember when I was training with Forrest Griffin for the fight, he had trained with Bisping, and he goes, he's not like a hard hitter per se, and he's not really strong, but he just likes hitting, and he hits all the time, doesn't stop hitting. And that's exactly how that went. Like he just started hitting me with knees and punches and, you know, by the second round, the fight was over. Like he was just really high level fighter compared to what I was used to.
Now, the official record says uh, TKO, but arm injury. So you hurt your arm?
Yeah, he had hit me like with some knees to the head and to the arm and stuff like that. So that they ended up stopping it between the rounds for that, you know.
Okay. Okay. Now, but you didn't suffer like a official like torn rotator cuff or arm injury or anything?
No, I mean, I don't know. It wasn't like anything I needed to go to the doctor for. Arm
Okay.
was a little, but I remember Joe Silva calling me afterwards. He goes, "Is your arm hurt?" And I go, "No, I'm good, but I would never admit to anything being hurt, you know." And he was like pissed, you know. He was like, it's funny.
And so that was your official last fight.
Yeah, that was a lot.
What, how did you come to the conclusion you didn't want to try it again? You're still contacted by Joe Silva. You were probably
Um,
still on their radar. They know by now, obviously, they have a serviceable 185 pounder. He probably had a couple of ideas for you. What was going on?
no, man. I was like, I went into that fight with the idea that if I didn't win, I was going to retire. And so when I didn't win, I just retired. Like I wrote up my resignation and sent it out to like the news organizations that day. Like, I don't know, it wasn't. And then I remember getting like fight offers from all different people, like Bellator and other people. And I was just like, no, I'm retired. Like, I'm not going to be one of those guys that retires and then keeps fighting. Like, I'm going to stick to what I say. And my gym was already making money at the time. And I remember feeling like I had lost money by fighting, like because I wasn't present in my business. And I was like, I had my son at that point, and I don't know, it didn't make a whole lot of sense for me. And fighting was so stressful. It was like a really shitty way to have to make money. So like when I was married and had a kid at that point, like when I first started fighting, I had none of that. So by the time I had that, my sense of responsibility was like, I got to make money. And this is the worst way I can imagine making money. It's so stressful. So then I just went back to doing stuff that like was easier to make money, like running the business, you know.
Okay, that shows.
When I fought Bisping, for instance, I got $10,000 for that fight. And they took like 4,000 out from taxes right away. So I got like a check for $6,000. And I think it was like 15 or $2,000 to do my medicals. So for like that multi-month training camp, I made like minimum wage basically. And Bisping made, I think, 500 G's for that fight. So I was like, it's just such a like a far concept for me to get to that money. Like I just didn't feel like it was responsible to keep going.
Now, obviously that's a wise choice. A lot of guys, try to fight through it, and then they find themselves older and maybe a little more banged up because you got to feel good about where your brain is, and that's like you really
I
didn't.
feel good about that, but I go back and forth with it sometimes in my head, like because like Masvidal, who I came up with, ended up making a bunch of money, but he went through a ton of adversity. He had to go through Strikeforce, other places, lost in Bellator, like so. There's something said for that. Like if you have the ability and you just never give up, you'll get there eventually. But like I said, I was in such a rush, and I was in a rush like building a family, like all these things. They like kept pushing me past different phases of my life, probably quicker than I needed to.
Okay, and I think you made a wise choice because, like I said, it does that idea of going to the UFC. I always thought that a fighter who is asked to take a pay cut and fight for less money after whatever money they've made, if you fight for $1,000 to go back to 500, it's like, if you made 50,000 to go back to fight for 20, it's like, So,
Yeah, but you know, the reality is that the pay is so shitty anyways, like you're really just fighting to get back to the top. You can't really think of it that way. Like now that I train a guy named Charles Rosa. Charles did 11 years in the UFC, really talented.
sure.
Um, and he'd won a bunch of fights and got bonuses. Towards the end of his career, it was like 50-50 fighter in the UFC, like, but they were putting him only against top 10 guys, and then they cut him. And he's like, what do I do? I go, let's just go win a bunch of fights, you know? So now he's like on a 4 fight win streak, and he's not making anywhere the money he was making in UFC, but he's working his way back into that position. And mostly I think it's important to go out on your own terms, you know? So like I look at it a little bit differently now than I did then, but I didn't have any guidance really back then. You know, nobody was giving me guidance, and there wasn't a lot of people that had done that road before me to give me guidance, you know?
Yep. No. How's your gym doing now?
Jim's doing very well. Yeah, Jim's doing very well. I got my kids training there and got a bunch of students there. It's a beautiful place. If you're ever in Deerfield, come through. And yeah, no, it's been a great experience. It's really fun to have positive impact on people's lives, you know?
And aside from Charles, what other? So when, for example, well, let's stick with Charles for a little bit because Charles Rosa is definitely. Um, I remember a few highlight fights he had, especially early in his career as well. Were you in his corner for those?
Yeah, I've been with him since his first day, you know, on the mats. He came into my gym a long time ago, the very first gym that I had opened with that Ultimate Fighter money. And he went with Cole Miller the first day, and like they went to war. And afterwards, I pulled him in the office. I go, "Hey, dude, you're really talented. Like, if you stick with this, you could be really good." He told me later, he goes, "I thought you were just trying to get me to sign up for a membership, you know." But um, yeah, I've worked with Charles. I've got his little brother now, Lucas Rosa, who's undefeated pro. He was a top amateur in the country. Matt Wagey, who's a UFC vet and uh, Bellator veteran, and I've worked with a lot of really great people that just recently fought in UFC. Another kid, Daniel Marcos, who's like 17-0 right now, UFC top prospect. Um, but it's weird. I do enjoy that, but I get the most enjoyment out of training like average people that are like looking to just get in shape and maybe get some of the stress out of their life. Like I just really like helping those people. I feel like I make a huge impact on people like that. Um, Fighters, they're like Ronins, you know, like they're gonna do their thing no matter what. But like if you like can convince somebody to overcome their fears and start training that never did it, and you watch them get in shape and it improves their well-being and improves their family life, and like I get so much enjoyment out of that.
That's awesome, and that's what as we wrap up here too. That's what I was talking about when I mentioned that Charles McCarthy was a real martial artist, you know, like, and at this point, a guy that's a lifelong martial artist, you know, passing it on like that. And it's interesting. I didn't remember that you were 275, you know, but at one point, but that whole path you took, now you're passing it on to other people, and that's what you find the most rewarding.
Yeah, I would say so, you know, like being able to have that environment where my kids can come in and train, and you know, it just means the world to me to be able to live that life still and enjoy it. I get to train every day. um I love teaching people, you know, like it just there's so many, it's all positive for me. I feel like I'm lucky to get to live a dream, like in a sense, like I'm getting paid to do what I love every day. And like I've got like the internet companies and I really enjoy programming still, and I get to do that stuff. And so it just I feel very blessed. I feel lucky to get to do what I do.
You know, and I'm blessed for having caught up with you again. It's been great to remember, you know, the old days, the shows together. And it's so great to see a guy that, you know, set a goal for himself and made it to his goal, and you know, still remain very much the same person. You know what I mean? It's like we talked
Thanks so
about your
much.
privacy and your uh, you know, fondness for code and stuff like that. You haven't lost any of those things, and that's
I
beautiful.
appreciate it. You did so much for me in my career and helped me get to where I was going. So thank you for that.
Charles, I appreciate it. Every time someone thanks me like that, I just say, you know, it was a joy to watch. You know, I got to observe it. I got to watch
What
it.
a, like, incredible experiences we got to share together. It's so cool, you know.
Yep, for sure, for sure. Charles, I want to thank you. I want to let you go. So we've been going for almost 2 hours, and I know your family and your kids probably want you back. We could probably keep going, but I'm gonna send you a link when we're ready. Okay, it'll probably be up by next Tuesday.
I can't wait to see it. Thanks so much, Miguel.
Big
Congrats
up.
on all your stuff, dude. I'm glad to see you're still doing this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Talk soon, man. We'll stay online together.